the Cape May Canal, part of the Intracoastal Waterway. Use your imagination, if you will, and imagine prior to World War II, you're sitting in this exact same spot. What you would have seen is no water. You would have seen dairy farms, and you would have had 2 railroads that came through here. All that changed just prior to World War II. The 2 railroads that came into town was the Pennsylvania Railroad, which actually got to Cape May first, and the Reading Railroad. Those 2 railroads had 3 passenger stations in town. The Reading, this one, had the station on Washington Street, which is right across from where the big church is at the head of the mall. That's where that building would have been. They picked it up and moved it to where its current location is, where you got on this train in the mid-'80s, and put some additions on it and stuff, so it's hard to even recognize what it was before. The Pennsylvania Railroad had 2 stations in town, one at about where Swain's Hardware is, and one on the beach, right down on the beach at a place that the locals nicknamed Summer Station, because it was only open during the summer. And there's a condominium complex there now that borrows that name, and it's called Summer Station. So if you drive down along Ocean Avenue, what is that road?
That's beach. That's beach, right by the Rusty Nail.
Yeah. So if you look at there, you'll see there's a little throwback of history that they borrowed. But so prior to World War II, there was the rubber tires, the automobiles that we all love so much, were taking a big bite out of passenger train ridership. And so these 2 railroads that ran together from Cape May Courthouse all the way into Cape May, and they more or less paralleled each other, because one went to Camden and the other one went to Philadelphia.
The steel speedway to the shore.
There you go. They merged, and they created a new railroad called the Pennsylvania Reading Seashore Lines. This railroad that runs the railroad now borrowed from that name, and they call themselves the Cape May Seashore Lines. And I don't know if you recognize, but I just talked about 2 of the pieces on a monopoly board, the Reading and the Pennsylvania. And the Cape May Seashore Lines is what's considered a short line, so there's the 3rd one. And then B&O, the Baltimore and Ohio Railroad, made it into Cape May on what's considered, into Atlantic City, on what's called trackage rights. They ran out of likely Philadelphia, I guess, and had trains that ran into Atlantic City, so that's why that one's there. So anyway, so they merge, they decide this is the railroad that they want to use, and they abandon the other one. And if you go up on up by Cold Spring, there's the biking path. That's the Pennsylvania Railroad. They're using it down here too. I see them. They're starting to do some stuff down here with bikes and walking trails. So anyway, that's what that is. So. Now the war in Europe is raging on. The United States gets into the war, and they realize that the locals down here realize that Cape May Harbor is unprotected for the most part, and so they petition to have this canal built so that their fishing fleets can enter in a relatively protected environment of the Delaware Bay. Which, by the way, was not protected prior to World War I. And the Navy built on what is now the Coast Guard base. They built a base out there that was the beginning of naval aviation. They actually had dirigible hangars out there. They had seaplane landing facilities and servicing facilities. So what we now have is the Navy flying off of its infancy was started here in Cape May. So they petitioned to have this built, but it's just dry land. So what did the railroad do? They said, well, before you flood it, we're going to dig a big hole right here, and we're going to build that bridge. So that bridge was put in before there was a drop of water underneath it. And at the same point, the Army Corps of Engineers was digging in both directions. And once everything was ready, they opened up the floodgates, so to speak, and filled it up. The interesting thing is, at the time, the Cape May Canal's widest point was right here. Now, it's the narrowest point, because after they decided to keep it, not just for the war effort and strategic purposes, they decided to widen it. And so what we see now is this pretty view in both directions was actually a very skinny little canal, which if you ever go see some of the old canals that were pulled with mules and such, they're very, very skinny. So that's what happened here. Was they did that, they kept it. One of the other little features about the canal, which we've been told was intentionally done, is that while you look to the right over here, you can see the bridge that comes in off of Garden State Parkway and such, but you can't see Cape May Harbor. And if you look the other way, towards the Delaware Bay, you cannot see Delaware Bay. We're told that was done on purpose. And it was done on purpose because German submarines could not sit in Delaware Bay and fire a torpedo, which were not smart ones like we have now. They could not fire it and either hit this bridge, which was a vital connection to Cape May, and they couldn't hit Cape May Harbor. So some people talk about, why do we worry about German submarines? There was hundreds of vessels sunk off the U.S. coast by German submarines.
And some of the oyster schooners were retrofitted to Coast Guard patrol.
There you go. So that's our little history of the Cape May Canal. One little tidbit Carol mentioned before. Carol's been with us 3 times now, so she's taking notes. She's going to do my job next time we run, right, Carol?
Fact checking the state.
There you go.
I'm adding.
Carol made a point before about that dirt over there. She was saying there was a bird that was over there, but what that really is, they take the dredge spoils that they not only keep the canal open but other places, and they'll bring it here and up behind that building over there, and as we ride along there's a berm on our left hand side on the way back. That's dredges. And I make this point because I was looking it up as when we started running down here just to see what everything was about, and I looked at an aerial view, and the moon landing, the hoax, that they say happened right up there.
Is that right?
No, it didn't. But it looks like the moon's surface,
right.
because as they put up this wet ground, it creates puddles, and the puddles, as they dry, create what looks to be craters on the moon. All right, what we're going to do here, we're going to head back to, did you have a question?
No.
Oh, okay. If anybody has any questions at any time, please let me know. We're going to head back into the salt marsh down here, but before we go, I want to make a point that there's a signal down here on the left-hand side. You'll see a mast. Just past that signal was a switch and a branch that went off, and it headed out east.
Yeah, I saw the other old tracks in there.
That's different.
Oh, yeah.
That I'm going to talk about too.
Okay.
There's another switch
there's another switch
Wildwood.
over here which is gone. There's almost nothing left of it. As a matter of fact, from everything that I can determine anyway, it would have gone through what is now where the dredge spoilings are. But so off we go.
People don't
Steve.
know, but there was a Wildwood cutoff back on the other side of the bridge that went straight to Wildwood. That was the largest station.
All right, no taking my line.